There is a book sitting in a library that almost nobody can understand. Its pages are filled with strange writing, unfamiliar symbols, plants that seem impossible to identify, and diagrams that look as though they belong to another world. For more than a century, people have tried to decode it. Cryptographers have studied it. Linguists have analyzed it. Even modern computers have been used to search for patterns, and yet the book remains unread. Nobody knows for certain who wrote it. Nobody knows exactly where it came from. And most importantly, nobody knows what it says. The manuscript's modern story begins with a man named Wilfrid Voynich. In the early 20th century, Voynich was a Polish-born bookseller and collector living in London. He specialized in rare and unusual manuscripts. Then, in 1912, he acquired a strange illustrated book from a collection of manuscripts in Italy. He didn't know exactly what he had. But the moment he examined its pages, one thing was obvious. This was not an ordinary medieval book. The writing was unfamiliar, the illustrations were bizarre, and there were hundreds of pages filled with a language nobody could confidently identify. Voynich became convinced that the manuscript contained a hidden message. He began showing it to scholars and cryptographers. And slowly the mystery began spreading. But there was a problem. Nobody could prove where the manuscript had actually come from. Before Wilfrid Voynich ever owned the manuscript, someone else may have considered it valuable. One name appears repeatedly in the story: Rudolf II. The Holy Roman Emperor ruled from Prague during the late 16th and early 17th centuries. His court was fascinated by unusual knowledge: astronomy, alchemy, natural history, medicine, and strange manuscripts from distant places. According to a letter associated with the manuscript's history, Rudolf is said to have paid a large sum for a mysterious book. But here's where we need to be careful. The evidence does not prove beyond doubt that the book was the Voynich manuscript. The connection is part of the mystery. Later, the manuscript was reportedly associated with the English scholar John Dee, and then it passed through other hands. Each owner left another small piece of the puzzle. But nobody left the most important piece: the key to the language. The first thing that makes the Voynich manuscript so difficult is also the most obvious. Nobody knows what language it is written in. The manuscript contains hundreds of pages of unfamiliar characters. Some symbols appear again and again. Others seem to occur only rarely. The writing flows across the pages with remarkable consistency. It looks like a real language. But no known language has been confidently matched to it. Researchers have compared it with Latin, Hebrew, Arabic, European languages, Asian writing system, and even constructed languages. Nothing provides a convincing answer. Yet, the manuscript doesn't look completely random either. The symbols repeat in patterns. Some sequences appear frequently. Others occur in particular parts of the pages. That creates a tantalizing possibility. Perhaps this isn't meaningless scribbling. Perhaps it really is a language that we simply lost the ability to understand. But there is another possibility. What if the pattern itself is the trick? And then there are the plants. The Voynich manuscript contains page after page of botanical illustrations. At first glance, they look almost ordinary: stems, leaves, roots, flowers. But look closer, and something feels wrong. Some plants resemble real species. Others seem to combine features from completely different plants. Their roots can look strangely oversized. Their leaves don't always match their stems, and some of the flowers are difficult to identify with any confidence. Researchers have spent decades trying to match them to known plants. Some have suggested medicinal herbs. Others have proposed plants from different regions of the world, and some have argued that the drawings may have been deliberately altered. But there is a bigger problem. If these plants were meant to identify something real, why make them so difficult to recognize? And if they aren't real plants at all, what exactly was the artist trying to show us? If the manuscript really contains a hidden message, someone should eventually be able to break it. And over the decades, some of the world's most experienced codebreakers tried. During the 20th century, the Voynich Manuscript attracted people who had spent their careers studying secret communications. Cryptographers searched for repeating patterns. They counted symbols. They compared sequences. They looked for evidence of grammar, substitution, and encryption. The hope was simple. If the strange writing was a code, perhaps the patterns would eventually reveal the method. But the manuscript refused to cooperate. One problem was that its symbols seemed to follow rules. Certain characters appeared more often than others. Some combinations repeated. The text was divided into what looked like words. That made it look surprisingly language-like. But when researchers tried to apply conventional code-breaking techniques, the results repeatedly fell apart. Then computers entered the story, and suddenly, researchers had a new weapon. They could analyze thousands of characters in seconds. But more data didn't necessarily mean more answers. Because the deeper researchers looked, the stranger the pattern became. Here's where the Voynich Manuscript becomes even stranger. Researchers don't only look at what the symbols mean. They can also study how often the symbols appear and how they occur next to one another. And that matters because real languages tend to have patterns. Some letters are common. Some combinations are rare. Some sounds and characters tend to appear together, while others almost never do. The Voynich Manuscript appears to show some of these statistical features. Its symbols aren't simply scattered randomly across the page. Certain groups recur. Word-like units appear. And different sections of the manuscript seem to use different patterns. To some researchers, that looks like evidence that the text may encode meaningful information. But statistics can't tell us what that information actually means. A sequence can look remarkably similar to language without being a language at all. A clever cipher could produce patterns. So could a carefully constructed hoax. And that leaves us with an uncomfortable question. Are we looking at a forgotten language or a brilliant imitation of one? Eventually, someone claimed to have solved the mystery. In 2017, British academic Gerard Cheshire announced that he had deciphered the Voynich Manuscript. He argued that the manuscript was written in a previously unidentified language and used an unusual writing system. For a moment, it sounded like the breakthrough researchers had been waiting for. The impossible book finally had an answer, but there was a problem. Other specialists examined the claim, and they did not accept the proposed decipherment as a convincing solution. The University of Bristol, which had briefly published material connected to Cheshire's work, later distanced itself from the claim. The manuscript remained undeciphered. And this is one of the most important lessons of the Voynich mystery. A proposed translation is not the same thing as a solved language. To truly crack the manuscript, another researcher should be able to take the proposed method, apply it to the text, and independently reproduce the results. That has not happened. So the mystery survives. But perhaps the biggest question is still waiting. What if the manuscript was never meant to be understood by us at all? So what is the Voynich Manuscript? There are three possibilities. It could be a lost language, written by people whose words disappeared from history. It could be an elaborate code, designed to hide information from anyone who didn't know the key. Or it could be something even stranger, a carefully constructed hoax that was created to look like a real language. Each theory explains some of the evidence, but none explains everything. The manuscript has survived for centuries, passing from one collector to another while its meaning remained hidden. Today, researchers can photograph it, analyze its symbols, study its patterns, and examine its strange illustrations in extraordinary detail. But after all those years, one question remains unanswered. Who wrote it, and what were they trying to tell us? Maybe someday someone will finally read it. Until then, the world's most mysterious book remains exactly what it has always been. A message without a known reader.